People are creating banks out of nothing and are trading these invisible coins back and forth, and there's not even a physical representation of it. I mean, money is just a thing.
This is Insight, scaling lessons from the street. In this series, we mastermind a set of topics plaguing women entrepreneurs on a mighty growth path, such as mindset, business modeling, sales, marketing, finance, and legal. Whether you're looking for world domination or to work less while being more profitable, you'll find learnings in here from women who know the journey and fight in the trenches every day. Inside is co-hosted by Andrea Henry, Megan O'Neill, Shelagh Cummins, Susan Diaz, and Wendy Brookhouse.
My name is Shelagh Cummins, and I am one of the co-hosts of Insight. I run a company called Cummins & Co., and we offer women entrepreneurs coaching, consulting, training, and soon to be capital to help them launch, grow, and scale their businesses. Each week on Insight, one of us will moderate a discussion around a topic of growth that is close to our hearts and to our bottom lines, of course. And this week, I'd like to introduce the topic of pricing. How do you price your services? This is actually a two-part podcast. Part one is going to be talking about the mindset and the belief systems and what I notice about women and pricing, and we're going to talk about that. The second stage of this podcast, Wendy Brookhouse is going to take us through some really amazing strategies of how to set your prices. You know, I notice there are two schools of entrepreneurs that I see. I see that there are the school of entrepreneurs who are struggling and those who are profitable. And the struggling entrepreneurs, I notice, tend to be scared to ask for money or to state their fees. And I do think it's because they are afraid of rejection. Whereas when I see an entrepreneur who is thriving and profitable and, more clients than she knows what to do with, it's usually because she knows that her fees are just simply a filter for the clients that she'd love to work with. And so when we see a struggling entrepreneur, I see them where everything is about money. Money is like an oxygen to them. Whereas when I see an entrepreneur that's thriving, money is just simply money. It's a series of ones and zeros. It's just binary. There's nothing to it. It is just money. I notice that when entrepreneurs are struggling, that they tend to hide and they go back and take more courses and they're never ready to launch and they're afraid to make a booking. They're afraid to make offers. Whereas when a woman entrepreneur is thriving, I feel like she knows that her credentials are irrelevant because the only question that her clients will ask her is, "Can you help me?" So, ladies, I'm really curious about you and your connection to pricing. I know that there's many women in my circles, and myself included, who have struggled when it came to A, setting a price, but B, increasing their prices so that we met market value. Is this something that you've experienced in your business growth?
Absolutely, Sheila. Wendy here. I see it all the time with my clients, but I've been through the journey myself, especially in my industry where we're kind of trained to not ask for money. You're going to get paid by the commissions on the things that you might sell. And so it's almost like we're expected to do all the planning work on speculation that, okay, if we do a good enough job on the planning, then maybe they'll use us for all the implementation piece. So even just changing that for me and starting to ask for any dollars was super tough because the industry just doesn't do it.
Right.
And then I think that the hard part is how do you ask? Because even though now that I'm very confident in the results I can generate for people, and I'm very confident that I know I can make a difference, you still have that butterfly every time you put the price on the table.
What do you think that butterfly is?
I think it comes down to, am I going to take this as a personal rejection as opposed to rejection to the actual product, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, and then I think I've left money on the table sometimes because I helped one couple who were just in desperate straits, and I helped them and showed them and guided them to change their net worth by $185,000 in 1 year.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh my goodness, that would have been they got quite a deal.
Right.
So,
Right.
but how do you can't do that for everybody. So at the same time, being aware of what can you produce for results. Anyway, so that's been my journey with the money thing.
Yeah. It's interesting because I feel like when we talk about money, it does tend to be a female issue. And I may be stepping into hot water here by putting that out there, but there are very few men who will, who struggle as much about pricing their services as women do. Why do you think that is?
I can take a go a little bit on this and say it's a lot of conditioning in my case and in the case of several people that I've spoken to. There's a line that a friend of mine's husband said, which I've taken away and I use it with myself a lot. It's like, price like a man. It's like, don't be apologetic to do the thing that needs to be done. Start with sort of what shall we call it? Start with, what is this going to cost you? What is your profit margin? How much do you have to pay CRA? And then, back to Wendy's point, you're taking some of that, personal thing out of it, if you will, right? Like, it's one thing on the rejection side, but on the other side, it's like when you put out a number and you're working towards it, it helps to not get personal and emotional as far as I'm concerned. But I do get personal and emotional. And then I'm like, how can I make this cheaper? What will my friend think if I say that this is what it costs? And oh my God, should I forego my percentage of profit? Well, hell no. You run a business and you need to make sure that the lights are on and the doors stay open. So yeah, I think it's kind of muddied a whole lot with the emotion of it. But in terms of approaching it, I find separating that emotion is what helps me get to the place I want to price the services.
Megan, what do you think? You must deal with this all the time with your clients and the mindset behind what a price represents to them.
Yeah, and you said the magic word, beliefs. So I've been doing what I do, which is mindset. I've been a mindset expert for almost 20 years now. And I have been through this myself. This has been coming out of the gate. I think that one of the reasons why I struggled was two things. I wasn't brought up, so the conditioning, like Susan said. I had an employee mom. She was a nurse. No one ever she never negotiated anything. And for a couple of years when I got out of university, I was working contract and I had to negotiate my contracts. And I got everybody else to do it for me. Essentially, they handed me what I should accept, and I accept it. I didn't even question it. And it has a lot to do with just not having that, I think women in particular, I don't think you're in hot water for saying that. I think that's the truth, that we weren't taught how to value our skill set. I don't think that was something, how many of you had mothers who volunteered as the PTA mom or whatever and spent a lot of time donating her time? And it was just considered to be a sort of gauche subject, money, right? And to price yourself. So when I came out of the gate and I had to charge people right away, I struggled with this a lot. And I think what my go-to was to leave it to other people to determine what my prices were. So they call it price sourcing. I'm sure you know all about this. And you might see this today by people asking, their group, maybe their mastermind group or their Facebook group or even their spouse, God forbid. Don't ask your spouse because especially if they're a 9-to-5er, and because I did that. And they ask everybody else because I think we are afraid of taking responsibility. I think women, maybe Wendy will disagree with this, but I think women often don't want to take responsibility for money. I think we're still afraid of it. I think we have a lot of beliefs around that. And I think it's easier to give it to other people, our power to other people. What do we believe about when you ask someone for money and their reaction is, and I always tell my clients this, the reaction of the other person is, well, I don't know, that's a little too expensive, or whatever the reaction is, that's their belief about what they value. It really comes down, it's not a personal thing. It's not that there's something wrong necessarily with your price or what you do. It's what people believe about money themselves. So you're taking on their baggage, essentially.
Andrea here. I think for myself, and I know for a lot of my clients, especially when women are running service-based businesses, which a lot of us run, there's a difficulty to charge for what is a service, for what you think you should do for free. And I think as women, we've been conditioned, what Megan was talking about, like seeing our mothers volunteer, etc. We've been conditioned that we should give of our time freely. It's a good thing. It's charitable to give of our time. And so it feels icky to charge for something that you think that you should be given for free. I've seen a lot of clients, and especially people in the alternative health space who have a gift and who feel horrible about charging for that gift, because within that community, the idea is that you've received it, you have this particular talent or this particular, your senses are heightened, and that you shouldn't make money from it. And for me, it was difficult. I thought, one of the reasons for starting the firm was because legal services are so expensive, and wanted to make them more accessible for people. And the way how I got over it, in the process of getting over it, is to really look at the value, right? So what Wendy was talking about, if you see what it is that you can do for clients, it makes a big difference in being able to set prices. The other thing is understanding that people, for a long time, it was just like, oh, these things are expensive. And because I would have struggled to pay for some of the things that I was charging right at the beginning, I felt like no one else had the money to be able to do it. And then I saw people who had said that my services were too expensive, dressed in designer from head to toe, driving really nice cars, on Instagram in Costa Rica and Bali. And I realized, no, people have money. They just decide where to spend it. And so it kind of removed this is too expensive, or they're rejecting me, or I've set my prices as too much, to more of, am I doing a good enough job in explaining what the value is?
Yeah, I love that. And, we're going to get into the nitty gritty of setting your prices in the second part of this particular podcast with Wendy. But I just want to pick up on what Susan said of, what everybody's saying is, let's remove the emotion from it and just see money as money. Money is just that. It's money. Money in itself is an abstract entity. And I think we've seen this happen in our lifetime anyway, through the cryptocurrency phase, where people are creating banks out of nothing and are trading these invisible coins back and forth. And there's not even a physical representation of it. I mean, money is just a thing. And when we can separate that out and go through a very sequential and structured process to figure out our price, I think that is step one. And I also want to pick up on an undertone of what everybody else said was, and this is something that I notice I have to do with my clients right away, is help them get in integrity with the value that they bring. And when we talk about that, and when I bring up that concept, it is standing behind the results that you bring to your audience. And when you can answer the question, how can you help me, from one of your clients, there's nothing about that that's related to money. It's about the help, and people will pay for help. And they're allowed to tell you that it's too expensive for them. That's their choice. We can't control that, but we can choose whether we're going to buy into that scarcity mindset or not. I'm really excited to segue into the part 2 of this podcast in terms of, well, how do we set our price? Give us a structure so that we know that we're at least hitting market rate, if not going above. And if there's one thing that I'd love for you to be known for, it's that you might be expensive, but you're worth the investment. Mm-hmm. And the more work that you do that changes people's lives, the easier it will be to offer to do that same work to more people. And that is the difference between a successful and thriving entrepreneur and an entrepreneur who is struggling. And so if you are noticing that you keep going and taking more courses, and you're not talking to people, and you're not making offers and telling about what it is that you do, then I'm going to encourage you to go and look for evidence that the work that you do through either your service or your product, go and find the impact of that on someone else's life. Money is just money. How do you raise your rates? You go in and you change the numbers. That's it. Really excited for part 2 of this podcast.
Thank you for listening to Insight. If you enjoyed listening, do us a solid and leave us a review. It helps keep us motivated to put our time into producing episodes of value. Thank you.